as far as props go, I don't want to steal your thunder too much because we know you've got a poster of Bijan Robinson above your bed that you kiss every night. But still, when you see a running back come into the league that is described as an offensive weapon, not just as a running back, I think this is a solid play for the season-long touchdown props, or even once we get into the regular season games, anytime touchdown bets. Because look at the other running backs that are kind of used in this position. You look at guys like Christian McCaffrey. You look at somebody like Austin Eckler, running backs who can run it in from the goal line and also can catch those goal line passes. When you are a dynamic threat like that, it means you can score in a multitude of ways. And also, this is a run-first offense for the Atlanta Falcons. I think they're going to lean heavily on Bijan Robinson. If you can find a season-long touchdown prop for Bijan, I think that's the way to go for me.
I like that quite a bit, and I'll be on that as well. I will say that I think there is a chance that the Panthers could be the most improved team in the division. Right now, they're plus 350 to win the NFC South, but this all hinges, as we know, on Bryce Young. If you listen to Frank Reich, he has been nothing but effusive in his praise of Bryce Young, saying how great he looks in OTAs. The teammates that he is already getting to know and working alongside have said they are incredibly impressed. So I know we focus so much on how diminutive he is compared to most quarterbacks in the NFL. He's only 5'10", just over 200 pounds. But the early returns are he has been fantastic. And if he is as good as we think he's going to be, they have a nice set of players around him. Miles Sanders, we talked about. Adam Thielen is not quite at his peak, but a great veteran presence that Young will be able to rely on. I like DJ Shark. Hayden Hurst they signed on offense as well. So they also brought in defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero from the Broncos. We know how good that Broncos defense was last year. I think potential-wise, the Panthers have more potential than any team in that division. So if you're looking for a team to improve and maybe an outlier to win the NFC South or not one of the favorites, I like the Panthers at plus 350.
I think if anybody can scheme around the height problem, it's probably Frank Reich. Because that's the thing. If you have a glaring weakness for your quarterback, you have to have a head coach that is smart enough to plan the offense around this. Like we saw this with Baker Mayfield and Sean McVay. If anybody can get the most out of a quarterback, no matter how damaged he is, it's a good offensive-minded head coach. I think that's Frank Reich when it comes to Bryce Young. But for me, I think the Falcons have a lot of talent too. And I think the way that you play this division is if you see it as wide open like I do, you could take the Falcons and the Panthers at plus 220 and plus 350. If either of them win, you'll win some money. It feels like we can't talk about baseball as a whole without mentioning Ohtani in some context. How big of an impact could he make to a team that is vying for a World Series?
Oh, he could put them over the top. Like we always talk about, if you watch Foul Territory, we say, well, Baltimore, Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay needs something because they've kind of fallen apart here in the second half. But Baltimore, think about if you're a Baltimore fan, how excited you are. If they go out and trade three guys that are prospects and they have multiple prospects at every position and they get Shohei Ohtani, think about the excitement it brings not only to the fans but to the clubhouse. They're like, man, we just got the best player in the world and maybe the history of the game, and we traded, three AA guys for him. Like, okay, that's awesome if you're the Orioles or the because and a fan of the Orioles, because guess what? Your management and your team is all in. And I think he could be the difference between some teams making the playoffs and going out early or possibly winning the whole thing. Now, I don't know that he'll get traded because I don't know that Artie Moreno will make that decision. But if he does, it could be game changing.
AJ, you mentioned the Rays, and now they're tied with the Pirates for the worst July after that 13-0 start. What do you think's going on with those guys? The talent is there, but for some reason, nothing's clicking right now.
Well, here's the thing. They went 13-0. They're 31-33, I think, since they went 13-0, something like that. I think we had 31-32. They lost yesterday. So 31-33, they're beat up. Honestly, their pitching is kind of beat up, especially their bullpen guys. Yeah, they have Glasnow pitched well last night, but they lost in extra innings. McClanahan's back. He missed a bunch of time. Eflin's been good for them, but their bullpen is where it's kind of been beat up. And offensively, they haven't been as consistent as they were early in the year. So it's kind of everything has kind of crashed at the same time. And it's tough, man, because when you're a major league team, there's no breaks. Like they had an all-star break, and they're like, oh, we'll reset and we'll start over. Well, they came out of the break just as bad as they did before the break. So it is a team, it is an organizational effort, and they got to figure it out fast.
I think that is the big question. How are people going to fare in 17, and how is it going to decide the rest of their round? Ricky Fowler was one of the victims of this whole just yesterday. It wasn't on TV, which I'll say another thing. It's been very difficult to watch the coverage of the Open Championship. I don't know why it's so hard, why I need to have so many streaming devices. But Ricky Fowler had a triple bogey on this hole yesterday. But here is the point in favor of still backing Ricky Fowler. I think it's tough to back somebody who's at 1 over right now, I believe. But if anybody can handle the roller coaster of emotions that are the ups and downs of golf, don't you think it's Ricky Fowler after the year that he's had? And you could kind of tell, like I read an article about this very hole. It was very specific. And he was pretty stone-faced about this hole after talking to reporters on this. He said, listen, like I've had a really big roller coaster of success, of ups and downs in the past few years for me. So when I have a hole that's like this, I know that it's best to stay the course and not let this frustrate me. Because I think that's going to be the key for a lot of these golfers, especially the young ones, is not getting too flustered when the course fights back.
I think that's an exceptional point. And really, you hear this all the time in golf. It is a mental test. It is a test of your nerves. Just imagine going to 17 late in the final round if you're in contention. I mean, you talk about a knee knocker. It's going to be the ultimate test of whether or not you have the capacity to focus on what you're doing and not let the pressure get to you. So when you have been through it, like a Ricky Fowler, for example, and this is why an amateur, for example, I can't believe I said amateur. I've been listening to the telecast too much. Or an amateur like Christo Lamprecht. He's so mature for his age. And that's why even when they're leading after the first or second rounds, that you can still get great odds on them, A, because of inexperience, and B, part of it is the mental makeup. You haven't been in this position before, so you're likely to falter. Not only did he lose his team, he got fined $60 million on the way out, which is nothing for him. He's a billionaire many times over, but it's amazing how that worked. As soon as the sale was official, a few minutes later, boom, the report comes out to sort of say, hey, it's awesome. Everything's good now. By the way, Dan Snyder is as bad as we thought.
Yeah, do you think he even cares about this? Like $60 million? He's probably just just go ahead and put it on my tab. Like, it's not like his reputation was clear before this. I am glad that something finally happened, that he finally had to sell the team, that he's finally getting at least punished for some of these actions that are so reprehensible. But, you know, it's Dan Snyder. It is funny. Like, what's the equivalent that people can relate to on this? Like, if you got fired and then your I guess your old job was like, listen, and you owe us $12,000 in taxes that you're going to need to pay right now.
Well, I will say this. Whoa, double D. Thanks, man, Nelson. I got to be on the lookout today. Thanks, Nelson. Ha ha. Here's the thing, is that I was discussing this with Catherine last night, and it's easy to say, look, Dan Snyder, he got off easy, and he did, right? He did. This guy is a billionaire. He's going to move. He's moving overseas. He's almost being kicked out of this country because no one likes him across the board. He has no friends. And also, he's probably going to be on his yacht with billions of dollars. And it's easy to say, oh, he doesn't care about any of this. True. But also at the same time, his dream was to own the Washington Redskins growing up. His dream was to own this franchise. How many times in your life, if you're a kid and you dream, not just owning an NFL franchise, sometimes these franchises stay within a certain family. They're never even available for sale. He actually got the one thing he wanted as a kid, which was to buy this franchise, and he blew it. So I will say he's going to be fine. He'll be floating out on international waters with all the money and more that he could ever count. At the same time, if he has any sort of conscience whatsoever, which is debatable, he has to know, I had my childhood dream in my grip, and because of my own behavior, I let it go. I screwed this up.
Damn, that's kind of sad. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Because usually people who fulfill a childhood dream and are too emotionally attached to the team that they own, like maybe they run it into the ground, but it's not for lack of trying. Like, look at Jerry Jones. It feels like that's one of his kids. And, say what you want, but at least he pours his entire checkbook and all of his effort into that team. Same could not be said for Dan Snyder. In fact, it felt like he was sabotaging this very team. So it's very surprising for me to hear that.